After the detailed discussion on non-verbal communication, we are heading towards oral communication, which we can say is a part of verbal communication. In verbal communication, we have not discussed it so thoroughly. So now we are moving towards oral communication. Uh, in other words, we can say the communication which occurred by speaking or through the oral messages. So as far as in verbal communication, written communication is concerned, that is related to the reading and writing, whereas oral communication mainly focuses on listening and speaking. So why oral communication is very important? Because it is somehow different from non-verbal communication and from verbal communication, from written communication as well. Because when we are orally communicating, we are going with the wind, and accordingly we are setting our tone, style, and our way of communication. Most of the time when we are in business, particularly if we look at with the prospect of business, so in business, um, most of the time we are talking and we are listening with our colleagues, and we are talking or listening to our clients. So there may be a private discussion, conversation over lunch, a gossip in the lift, a telephone conversation, a chance meeting in the corridor, an informal gathering of staff. I mean, there you are also talking, you are not writing something. When you are instructing your subordinates, when you're dealing with your clients, always you are not writing the letters. Mostly things are finalized in the meetings. So formal meetings, there may be interviews, there may be training sessions, or particularly giving a presentation, conferences and seminars. So here most of the time you look at the different occasions where we are talking. In business, we are using oral communication instead of written communication. So written communication has its own pros and cons, whereas oral communication has its own. But oral communication is most of the time used in business in our daily life. All the time we are not using the language, and we are writing the letters. So we are using the language by speaking and listening. And that's why we need to bring a difference between speaking genre and written genre. Sometimes uh, in our oral communication, few people, few students, they are very well versed, they can speak well, but in written they are not as good. And in our community like Pakistan, India and Bangladesh, in Asian community mostly, we are learning through grammar translation method. I have found many students, they can write well but they can't speak well. So here I'm talking about speaking and written genre, because sometimes there are norms of the language. When we are speaking, that is mostly daily life speaking. So uh, that is sometimes a kind of informal thing, but in presentation that is formal. And sometimes there are phrases, there are words, there are slangs that we use that are considered quite appropriate in the speaking genre, but they are not considered as appropriate in the written genre. So both are the different fields. That's why the oral communication is very important. Sometimes we are saying something in through few words, and that have a big impact on the other person. So there are two subcategories of oral communication. One is speaking, and we are mostly well aware, and we are motivated for speaking, and we try to learn speaking all the time. But the most neglected aspect in oral communication is listening. We will move towards listening, but before listening, in speaking at business, we can address the meeting, we can address the discussions, but the most important skill you need to master, that is presentation skills. So in presentation skills, there may be different kind of presentation: impromptu, formal, prepared, structured, or memorized. And in my previous lecture in public speaking, I have discussed these kind of presentations thoroughly. So if you want to learn good speaking skills, if you can master the presentation skills, then speaking would not a matter for you. uh, Speaking is important and everyone think about it, but mostly people neglect listening. Listening is, we can say, more important than speaking, because if we look at our oral communication, speaking is useless without listening. If you are speaking and no one listening, as I've told you in the first lecture, you are standing in front of a wall and you are speaking, and wall cannot listen you, then this is not even communication. And another end, listening is half of communication. You are always speaking that someone listen you and you achieve your targeted purpose. So this is half of oral communication. It is as much important, and uh, it is as important as speaking and writing. Speaking and writing are basically, I would like to tell you, the productive skills or output skills, whereas listening and reading are the input skills or receptive skills. So both are very important, and listening is here in oral communication is half of communication. Without listening, we can't say there will be communication, so we need to focus on the listening as well. In upcoming lecture, I will also discuss about the listening process, and I'll also share a sample listening with you. So far, if you can't listen properly, your listening skills are not improved. In our schools, in our colleges, if we see, most of the time, even in our universities, we do focus on the speaking, but no one is focusing on listening. And listening is basic input skill. If you are listening properly, you are getting comprehensible input, then you can speak as well. So if you want to speak well, you have to listen. So listen is the first step, but we are trying to learn through grammar translation method. That's why we don't focus on this thing. Moving quickly towards the importance of listening. I mean, for example, if you are speaking well but your listener cannot understand you, and if someone is speaking well and you can't understand him, for example, if you visit any foreign country and if a native speaker is speaking but you can't pick up his words properly, then there will be miscommunication. How it can happen? That's why you need to improve your listening. In the next lecture, I'll discuss about the listening process as well, but here I'm going to give you one very important example. If you, whatever you are listening, you are taking it slightly wrong, then the whole message can be destroyed. Like this, here you can see this guy is calling and he's saying, send reinforcements, we are going to advance. And these are the listening guys, and they are perceiving it as, send 3 or 4 men, we are going to advance. So these are two different perceptions. Now he is in emergency, he want to raid somewhere, whereas his colleagues, they are considering that they are going on the party. So this is a big difference on the basis of listening. Although he has spoken correctly, but they have not listened it properly. That's why we are saying that listening is half of communication and you have to learn it thoroughly. So keep focus on listening skill and try to improve your listening. And I'd like to share another practice video with you related to IELTS, which will provide you practice of listening. Now, at the end of this video, I'd like to tell you the only input or receptive skill in oral communication. Now we are focused on oral communication. The only input or receptive skill is listening, and if it is not perceived properly, then we are not going to achieve our goal. So this is the only skill at the moment which lead towards the 100% success of our communicative instance, mean which leads towards the achievement of our goal of communicative instance. In 7 C's and all other lectures, you have learned that our every communicative instance is connected with one of the targets, and if we are not going to achieve that target, then our communication is flawed one. And if we are not listening, then this kind of result may be the outcome of our oral communication, and this is on the flaw of our listening skills. So don't ignore, the communication is a two-way process and it is important for the both sides. So listening is also essential if you want to get success in your communicative instance. So that's why in today's lecture I have discussed about oral communication, which is not like static kind of communication. We can say somehow written is static, and here we have discussed listening and speaking. In speaking, I have thoroughly discussed about the public speaking and other things, and you can go through that lecture. And here We have discussed a bit about listening and its importance and what could be the barrier. So you need to practice listening, and we'll discuss further process of listening uh, in the next lecture. Thank you.